Welcome to the Howard Hughes Show. Today I want to talk about the new Ghostbusters reboot, the 2016 reboot, the new Ghostbusters film that everyone has been waiting for. You know, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to talk about the first scene in the movie, and it's the only scene that I really would like to discuss in detail because I think it sets a tone which is completely wrong for Ghostbusters. You see, in the original movie, the opening scene takes place in a library, and everything's fairly innocuous, meaning not much is going on, things are moving around, until finally a librarian gets scared by something we don't even see. And that sets the tone for the Ray Parker Jr. music and the Ghostbusters logo, and everything really kicks into full swing at that point. All we need to really see is that scared librarian's face in order to get the feel of what Ghostbusters is all about. And it isn't about being scared, it's really about comedy. But that's about as scary as the original movie goes, you see. In the new Ghostbusters film, the first scene takes place in a sort of creepy mansion, and we actually learn about the ghost in that she is some sort of crazy killer. She killed her whole family. And that sets a very, very dark tone for a Ghostbusters film, which we're supposed to be laughing at, but more on the laughing part later. And what ultimately happens is, some kid gets trapped in a room with this crazy killer ghost, a very scary room, by the way, and that then leads to the Ghostbusters song, which is very brief. Can we have more of the song, please? And so on and so forth. In the original Ghostbusters film, there really aren't any ghosts that are revealed to be killers, not the original. Now, the second film, we actually are introduced to two that had the electric chair, so we know they must have done something bad. But the actual crimes of ghosts, or the reason why they're haunting, or whatever's going on in the original films, really isn't totally revealed. Even Vigo, who's the villain of the second movie, we really don't learn about any bad things he did, just we get the vibe that he's pretty evil. So this opening scene sets a completely wrong tone for the movie. The original movie had a semi-scary scene, and the new movie has a scene that really belongs in a horror movie. I feel like I should be watching The Haunting, or perhaps The Shining, or something like that, and being terrified, but that doesn't fit. Another thing about this new film is the equipment. There's a lot of LED diode lights going on everywhere, and if you're an electrician or you know anything about building film sets, it comes off as a bit lazy. But that aside, the main thing I want to talk about is the equipment. There are like two scenes, I think, in this new film where the Ghostbusters test out new equipment, of course made by Dr. Holtzman, who steals the film, but these scenes don't really work in this new movie. It seems like dead space. They're just testing out CGI effects, and believe me, the movie is loaded with CGI effects. It probably rivals Phantom Menace in terms of just CGI coughed up all over the screen. But these scenes where they're testing the equipment don't really add much. All we want to see are the proton packs. That's it. We don't care what else they have. We just want to see them pull out the proton pack, aim it at something, and shoot it at a ghost. We don't need the rest of that crap. And another thing about these new proton packs and proton guns is the proton gun itself, it looks stupid. The original movie had way cooler proton guns. It was so cool that for me as a kid in the 80s, I wanted that thing right away. Give me one. I had like two of them. I had that blue one that goes on your back. I had the slide projector that put like slides of Slimer on the wall. I loved that. And this new movie, how is a kid going to get into a metal tube? The new movie has them holding metal tubes attached to a box. It almost looks as if like they took a wrapping paper roll and put aluminum foil around it, or maybe they went to Home Depot and got some galvanized pipe and stuck it on there. It's stupid. It doesn't even look realistic. Like if you were going to build the real thing, it wouldn't be just a tube. It would have something on it. I mean, it doesn't look good. It looks very bad, very poor, very little thought. And while we're on the subject of CGI, it seems like the last 45 minutes or so of the movie are just inundated, just pounded, just smeared with CGI effects everywhere. It's almost as if they didn't even care about the actors or the setting or anything. They just wanted tons of CGI effects. And it really gives you a headache, just like the Phantom Menace did, and a lot of other movies that are overloaded with CGI effects, other Star Wars movies. But to talk about the CGI effects, you really have to go back to the original Ghostbusters movie. That stuff really looked real. For its day, that was basically CGI. You get yourself a model, you take pictures of the model, then you put a little drawing of, ether, purple smoke around it, and it starts to look like a ghost, and it looks really cool because the models actually move and they look real. But in the new Ghostbusters 2016 movie, the CGI just really looks bad, and audiences are so familiar with CGI nowadays that we can spot it a mile away. A lot of film directors say that mechanical objects, like going back to Star Wars, say some of the drones, the mechanized units, the machines that people ride on, some of the droids, of course, they look very realistic in CGI. Anything that has metallic nature to it looks real. But when you try to do a sort of person, and I know these are ghosts, so they shouldn't look exactly like people, but when you do skin tones, they don't really look real. And the ghosts in this movie, honestly, they look like stiff puppets. I don't know how else to put it. Mannequins, I guess you might say. They look like mannequins, and it takes you out of the movie because it's so obvious. It's almost as if they should have just tried to do something more, I think, if they'd have tried practical effects, on-scene effects with puppetry or something like that. Instead of putting so much CGI into this movie, it just doesn't come off as real. And that's saying a lot to say that the original Ghostbusters movie actually looks better in terms of special effects. I mean, it really does look good. I mean, you have matte paintings when they're at the top of that building where Gozer is, Dana Barrett's apartment. And those matte paintings and the special effects with the drawings, it comes off so much more realistic than I think you can possibly pull off these days. And Ghostbusters really is one of those movies like Star Wars, the original Star Wars, I guess episode 4 now, that is just surprisingly good. Especially for the era, the early to mid 80s, but it's just surprisingly great. And those original Star Wars effects and original Ghostbusters effects still look real to this day. Don't be disappointed by the new one. It's just a fad. I'm sure CGI will start to fade in terms of blasting audience with it in the coming years. A lot of the jokes in the new movie fall really flat. Like, I believe the guys at Half in the Bag pointed out that Janine opens the door and she says, dropping off or picking up to a cop, implying they're either going to pick up one of the Ghostbusters as crazy, or they're going to drop off another crazy person who's possibly haunted by a ghost. But the fact that the police would show up to drop off a suspect at the Ghostbusters station, alone is hilarious. You don't even need to make a joke about it. Janine just plays it off seriously, and audiences laugh. And that's kind of the thing with Ghostbusters. It's an absurdist comedy. I don't think they really got that with this new movie because the characters are just riffing, doing jokes. I heard that they were making up stuff on set, and a lot of it is unrelated to the Ghostbusters plot, whereas in the original movie, the absurd idea that these scientists are out catching ghosts and becoming sort of like ghost police officers is pretty darn funny, and you don't have to add anything to it. It's just hilarious. Anyway, here's an example of some bad comedy, I think, from the new film. Chris Hemsworth, he plays a guy named Kevin who's a ditzy secretary, totally the opposite of Janine Melnitz in the original, who's a crafty, smart, brilliant woman. But, you see, he does just silly, stupid things. Like he says a fish tank is really like a submarine for fish. Yeah, it has nothing to do with Ghostbusters. He pulls out a bunch of logos for the Ghostbusters that he's drawn. One of them is the 7-Eleven sign. I mean, it gets a laugh from audiences. I'm sure everybody in the audience laughed. But is that going to be funny 10 years from now? Once you've seen it once, the comedy value almost fades. I'll give you an example of something from the original movie that just will always crack me up. When the Ghostbusters are in that hotel and they're in the ballroom and they're shooting up the ballroom, and then one of the Ghostbusters can't turn off his proton gun, and Bill Murray, Dr. Venkman, turns around and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, nice shooting, Tex." That is some funny stuff. I could laugh at that every single time I see it. It never, ever goes away because it's right in the scene. It has to do with what the Ghostbusters are doing. They're ghost busting. They're not good at it. It's funny. It's always going to be funny. That is what Ghostbusters is all about. And, you can't get that kind of humor anymore, though, because Harold Ramis, the original writer, along with Dan Aykroyd, who's still alive, well, Harold Ramis passed away. So, a lot of that wonderful comedic wit is just lost on this movie. Here's a bit of a complaint. Christine Wiig, she plays Dr. Gilbert, the physicist who's on a tenure-track position and, things go awry and she has to start ghost busting. Well, her character just is completely flat in this movie. She tries to play the straight character like an Egon Spangler, Harold Ramis' character from the original, who is just somebody like a sounding board. Like, he's serious, but everything else is funny, so because he's so serious, it's funny. Kind of reminds me of Leslie Nielsen, in the Police Academy movies, where he was a straight, he's just a real cop. He's doing what he's supposed to do, but the stuff happening around him is absurd and stupid, and we have to laugh. But it doesn't really work in this movie because the comedy is not related to the situation. They're not really making jokes about ghostbusting. For instance, Abby Yates, her character, played by McCarthy, she has this running gag with a Chinese restaurant where she's complaining about the wontons in her soup. I mean, it's just too random. Make your jokes about ghostbusting, please. Here's a Harold Ramis joke, an Egon Spangler joke that really plays off in the first movie, and every time you see it, you get a sensible chuckle. He's fixing the computer for Janine, and he stands up, and she says, "Oh, do you have any hobbies? I play racquetball." And he says very, very straightly, "I collect spores, molds, and fungus." Every time you see that, it's just a belly laugh or a sensible chuckle or whatever you're in the mood for, but it always gets a chuckle. And you see, the reason why that works is because Egon's character is just a straight-laced scientist doing something really goofy, building ghostbusting equipment, building unlicensed nuclear accelerators for your back. I mean, that's funny. And while we're on that subject, one of the actually funnier scenes in the new Ghostbusters has Dr. Gilbert putting something around her neck while she tests out a proton gun, and it's kind of crazy and goofy. And that's the kind of comedy we're looking for in Ghostbusters. That scene in the subway where they're shooting out ghosts for a second, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it's obvious they're going to shoot ghosts. That scene gets more laughs from the audience than any other scene because they're making fun of ghostbusting. I mean, it's stupid to be hunting ghosts, right? So they're making fun of themselves. And that is what Ghostbusters is all about. It's about something so stupid and so idiotic, yet also something that probably maybe might be needed someday. Who knows? Maybe we will need Ghostbusters. You never know. I mean, it's just that absurdist, possibly not absurdist. It's great. And that's what we need more of. Not jokes about egg rolls or about 7-Eleven signs. It just doesn't work. And while we're on the subject of 7-Eleven signs and Chris Hemsworth's character, he is very out of place in this movie. I don't want to reveal too much about his place in the movie and his sort of story arc, but all of his jokes are just random, and they play on the fact that he's stupid, and it's just dead space, because even though it gets laughs out of the audience, 10 years from now when you're watching this on DVD, you're just going to say, wow, this character really was not meant for this movie. It doesn't work, because the jokes have nothing to do with the movie. There's a bad guy in the movie. His name is Rowan North, played by Neil Casey. And just suffice to say, he does not get very much on-screen time. It's just very little, and it's a little disappointing. I mean, just to go from that into CGI is disappointing because he seemed like he really fit the part, kind of a weird dude, out of place in society. I wanted to see more of that. I don't know about you guys, but I wanted to see more of that character, and we just didn't get it. We just launched into CGI territory. Bing, bada bing, bada boom. And so about those ending scenes, without really revealing anything, I already mentioned that it's just a big CGI action fest. There's no comedy. I think the last 45 minutes or so, 40 minutes maybe, the funniest thing is maybe seeing Slimer. I mean, that's about it, and I don't think that's much of a spoiler to reveal that. That's about it. There's no comedy. Abby Yates says we have to run at one point, and I guess they're playing on her weight, but all of the jokes seem to be about her weight. Wontons, we have to run. It's not funny. It has nothing to do with ghostbusting. It's a stereotype. Why? Let's not. Another thing that I found pretty disappointing, and I don't know why, was the car they got. In this movie, it's a hearse. In the original movie, it's a mid-century ambulance. I don't know why, but I'm very attached to that original car. I played with it as a kid. I owned it. I drove it around for hours. I want to see the original car. I don't want to see a hearse. Sorry, guys. Same thing with the boiler suits. What's with the orange stripes? No elbow pads? I mean, I know we're trying to be a little different from the original, but I need to connect with that original movie in order to feel like this movie deserves my admiration. And I just cannot make that connection when you change things, even just subtly like that, especially important things like the car. A hearse and an ambulance perform two opposite things. I mean, the hearse is like, ooh, scary movie, Halloween. The ambulance, kind of funny. They're going to help people, right? I don't know. The last thing I'd like to mention is, especially since I've repeated over and over that they use too much CGI, it's repeating a mistake. Bill Murray and some other cast members mentioned that the second Ghostbusters movie was not as successful as the first because they did something like 5 or 10 times the number of effects that they did in the original, and the effects sort of overtook the movie. You know, like making the Statue of Liberty walk, hundreds and thousands of ghosts flying through the air, the Titanic arriving. You know, all of that stuff was great, but it's not necessarily funny, although the Titanic was a little funny. Too much special effects in a Ghostbusters movie takes away from that synergy of the main cast. You want to see Dan Aykroyd and you want to see Bill Murray getting together and riffing, you know, especially riffing in a central Ghostbusters related thing, like riffing about the packs, riffing about the containment thing, riffing about the Dan Aykroyd shows up with that ambulance and he starts talking about it needs a million different things, shocks, brake pads, blah, 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 and that is funny, and it has to do with what they're doing. It's in the moment, it's funny. But so I think it's a little shocking for them to repeat that same mistake, especially when Dan Aykroyd has a major investment in this film. I mean, to repeat that same mistake of too much special effects just seems so obvious. But then again, they probably had a lot of pressure from Sony, so I can't really fault Aykroyd for that. I mean, he obviously didn't make the movie, but he was in the movie. Cameos from the original cast. Bill Murray in particular, the guys at Half in the Bag said he spends all his time sitting in this movie, and it's true. In the second movie, he didn't even want to actually wear the Ghostbusters outfit. I can't remember a scene where he wears it. He might have worn it for a second, but he did not want to wear the Ghostbusters costume. He didn't want to look goofy. He spends a lot of the movie just taking out Dana Barrett to fancy restaurants, right? But it still works. It still works. And Dr. Venkman is the kind of character who would sort of be off-putted by being a goofball like Ray Stantz. So, I don't know. A funny thing about that, when I was a kid, we learned the Pledge of Allegiance in class, and we used to say it every morning. And the part that goes, "To the Republic in which it stands," I used to think you had to say, "To the Republic of Richard Stantz." That's embarrassing. Very embarrassing. But true. And you know what? I don't think I said that during the Pledge of Allegiance because I knew it came from the Ghostbusters film. I think it was just subconsciously in my mind, so I thought we had to say that because there was some dude named Richard Stantz who was like involved with something. I don't know. Anyway, so final verdict. What do I really think about the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot? It's got a 73% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I don't think that really says much about the film. The first half is pretty good. There's some synergy that starts to build up between the characters. Even though I said I didn't like Kristen Wiig's performance as Dr. Gilbert, I think it has a very strong place, and I think it has potential, especially in sequels. But ultimately, I think the movie just somewhere around the middle starts to fall flat on its face, and the humor becomes way, way too random, and it just seems like nothing's going to really happen, and it becomes too epic. Go see it. Go see it. I would recommend seeing it because you need closure from your childhood. You need to know what's happening out there. But did I love the movie? Did I like the movie? It was okay. That's all I'm going to say. It was okay. I would give it like a C+, maybe a B-. I'm a little disappointed, but I wouldn't say it's bad. I wouldn't say it's the kind of movie to avoid. I would just say they could have done a little better. They could have watched that original movie a few more times, really gotten a gist for Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd's screenwriting ability, and so on. Another last thing, let's talk about the cameos in this new reboot, because we have all of the surviving cast, except Rick Moranis, who's retired, appearing somewhere in the film, and it just doesn't feel right. I really think these Ghostbusters should have dressed up in their old outfits and passed on the torch to a new generation. I'm sure a million people have said it, but it just doesn't feel right to have the Ghostbusters being random citizens in New York. Now, admittedly, Dan Aykroyd's appearance is pretty funny, and I'll let you see that for yourself. But the rest of them, it's just random. It's just, okay, here's a Ghostbuster, but they're just a, part of the movie, just an extra. Well, not even an extra, just a, subsidiary cast member. But, cameos versus passing the torch. I mean, how can you avoid passing the torch on? How can you not do that? It would take the heart of my generation and try to implant it into the heart of a new generation. But instead of doing that, we just sort of crap all over the Ghostbusters and put them in random places, and these are your new Ghostbusters. Have a good time. Anyway, I'm Howard Hughes. This has been a Howard Hughes review of Ghostbusters 2016. go out and see it, you know? I'm not trying to tell you to give your money away, but you're going to see it eventually anyway, so just get it over with like I did and do what you got to do. I'd like to end this review with a quote from the angry video game nerd, James Rolfe. In one of his many videos, he stated that, "I'd love to see Ghostbusters 3, even if it was just the Ghostbusters sitting around taking a dump." You know, I don't know if those are the exact words he uses. Maybe it was taking a crap. But that's pretty much true. If you'd have put the original Ghostbusters cast into a new film, I would have loved it. I wouldn't even care what they'd have done. That's how much I love those guys. That's why you had to pass the torch. You had to pass the torch. You missed the ball, Sony. Better luck next time. Hey, in the second movie, maybe they can pass the torch. Maybe we can find out they actually were there doing... that probably won't happen. Thanks for watching my show, The Howard Hughes Show. This has been a Howard Hughes review. You have a great day.